Hi scientists, today we're going to run through our natural selection simulation on PhET. Just in case you can't get the simulation to work, I'm going to record it here for you on YouTube. So we start by hitting intro. We'll click the brown fur mutation and then add a mate. And then we're just going to observe what happens. We can see the timer up here is showing us the time until the next generation begins. And then in our graph, we see the number of generations on the x-axis and the population size on our y-axis. Okay, so now it's the start of the fourth generation. I'm going to pause it. You can have a visual of what the rabbits look like on the screen. I'm also going to click this proportions button here, which allows us to see the total number of bunnies, and then how many are in have white fur and have brown fur. And I'm also able to click through the generations here and see how it's changed over time. Okay, so I encourage you to pause and answer the questions for task 1. Now we're going to move on to task 2. So I'm going to click the limited food button. I'm going to go back to my graph. And I'm going to let the simulation run for about 4 more generations. You can see in my timer up here that the green pie slice represents the time in which the food is limited. So we're making observations about what happens to our number of rabbits during the time when we have limited food. Okay, so now we're into our 8th generation, so I'll pause, and then I'll go back to proportion so that you can see one thing that's interesting is the number at the start and the number sort of at the end. And then I'll click through these so you can see right the start and the end and the proportions of white versus brown fur. And reminder that generations 1 through 4 were before we had added in that limited food. Okay, so go back and pause at any point to see the different generations and then answer the questions for task 2. I'm going to move on to task number 3. So for task 3, we reset. We click on brown fur. We add a mate. We're going to start by just running it through the first 4 generations, just like we did before. And then at the start of the 4th generation, I'm going to click the wolves button to add in a predator. Okay, and so now we'll observe what happens. And again, on our timer, we can see that the wolves are only present for part of each generation's time. At this point, I'm going to pause. We'll go back to proportions. And again, I'm just going to click through slowly, looking at the total number of bunnies at the start and at the bottom, and then comparing the proportions. Again, brown fur is sort of this diagonal stripe, and white fur is the brown or the solid green. So 10, generation 9. And then 4 through 1, I'll click through, but remember this was before the wolves were present. Okay, you should be able to go through and pause at any point, take a few minutes to answer question number 6 in task 3. And I'm going to go ahead and complete the second half of task 3. Okay, so we reset, we click our brown fur, mutation, and switch to our winter setting. We're going to add a mate. And we're going to do the same thing here. So at the beginning of the 4th generation, I'm going to add in the wolves. And we'll observe what happens through the next 6 generations. Okay, the bunnies have taken over the world, which is fine. That's entertaining. So let's close that down. We didn't quite get to 10 generations, but that's okay. So let's go back through our proportions. So this is generation 7. We can see at the start there's 822 bunnies, and this generation is a little bit of a wash because they took over the world, okay? And we can see our percentage, they all have white fur. And I'll click through these. So generation 6, generation 5, generation 4, and now we're going back before the wolves were present. And at the beginning. Okay, so okay, so again, pause. You should be able to pause at any point through my clicking through the generations, and you should be able to answer the rest of the questions based on this information.